Some of my earliest gaming memories are of the original Game Boy. The iconic grey brick with its green screen and chiptune music. And the game that I always came back to was Tetris. It was simple on the surface, but incredibly challenging. I can still remember the hours I put in trying to chase high scores, and if you were lucky enough to have one of those link cables, you could even go head to head with a friend in battle mode. Now, nearly 30 years later, it's come full circle. That same game I used to play as a kid has become a tradition in our house. My wife and kids and myself now spend hours battling it out on the Nintendo Switch. Same game, different screen, but somehow the feeling is exactly the same. So when I came across this wooden Game Boy on Etsy, I was hit with a bunch of nostalgia, and it really made me want to make one of these myself from beginning to end, and I thought I'd share the process with you all. So if you hang around, I'll take you behind the scenes from raw materials to the finished product, and you'll see how I make my very own tribute to this timeless classic. I start off with a very unflattering side profile of myself walking through the hardware store. With layered designs like this, consistency is everything, especially with the thickness. If just one sheet is off, even slightly, the cartridge won't sit right in the Game Boy shell. I ran into this problem with the first few attempts at making the Game Boy, so I usually measure each piece here with the caliper, but I forgot to bring it, so I'll measure the pieces before I put it into the xTool later on. The next step is to cut each sheet into 30 centimeter squares, as that is the maximum cut size for the xTool M1 Ultra. But first I remove all the tags from each sheet, so I don't have to mess with it later on. Then I just run each sheet through my table saw, which has been adjusted for 30 centimeter cuts. Next, I jump onto the design. I use Inkscape for all my designs. It's free, it's easy to use, and it hasn't let me down yet. The Game Boy is built in multiple layers, each one serving a purpose. The button cutouts, the screen frame, the housing of the springs, all of it has to come together perfectly. And of course, I had to design a cartridge to go with it. So to keep in tune with the release of the actual Game Boy back in the 1980s, I thought I would release this Game Boy with Tetris. And I'd add a little surprise for anyone who knows their Tetris setups. Now, if you're looking closely, you might notice all the different colored lines in my design. This is to allow xTool's Creative Space software to let you assign different settings to different colors. So in this setup, red means cut, blue is for scoring, and black is for engraving. I'll get more into this a little bit later on. And we're just about ready for the first cut. So I grab a few sheets of MDF and I double check that they're exactly 3 millimeters thick. Like I said, consistency here makes a big difference later on. Now, the one thing I really love about the xTool is this built-in one-click distance measurer. I just tap this button and the machine lowers the laser module to check the height of the material. It figures out the distance and it adjusts the focus of the laser automatically. No guesswork, no messing around. Next up, the color panels on the bottom left corner of this screen lets me assign my custom presets for each line color. Red for cuts, blue for scores, and black for engravings. And if I need to tweak anything, I can dial in those settings here. Once everything's ready, I hit process, and the software even gives me an estimated runtime. When it's go time, I press the start button in the software, but before the laser kicks off, you do need to press the physical button on the xTool itself. You know, safety first and all that. But after that, you can sit back, relax, and watch it work its magic. I noticed one of the pieces that remained in one of the holes that was cut out. And I thought I'd show it here because it really emphasizes the accuracy that this laser can cut. I mean, look how thin this piece is. Once all the pieces are cut out, I lay everything out to make sure that it all matches up perfectly. And the buttons, like I said, aren't just glued in. They're mounted into tiny springs so they actually press down and bounce back up like the real thing. So here, I'm assembling those buttons to allow for that sweet, sweet pressing action. messed up a couple of times on the start and select button, so I cut them out again and thought I'd make it right. The main body itself is built from stacked layers of MDF, each one creating depth and function. This is where I realized I'd accidentally left some of the lines on the Tetris pieces as black, which meant the xTool software treated them as engravings instead of scores. They were meant to look like this, but if you let me know in the comments which ones you prefer, I might even change the design. I arranged the Tetraminos to create a T-spin setup, a little Easter egg for those hardcore Tetris fans out there. After everything dries, it's time for the final tests. The buttons seem to work fine and they have just the right amount of spring back. And every time I slide the cartridge into the back of the game slot, and you can see this frozen moment of Tetris through the Game Boy screen, it honestly really feels a little bit magical for me. What started as a small nostalgic idea turned into one of my favorite builds to date. I'm always looking for new games to make, so if you have any ideas on your favorite Game Boy games, please drop them in the comments and I promise you I'll give them a go. And if you want to see more builds like this, then please stick around. There's a lot more to come. Stay safe out there everyone, and I'll catch you on the next one.